Blessings and welcome to another daily devotional. Today we are in 1 Samuel chapters 14 and 15, and we're going to get right into it because there's a lot of stuff here. Um, Sometimes when we're reading the Bible and we're looking at a lesson, we learn more from the things that were done wrong than we do from the things that were done right. I know me personally, I learn more from my mistakes than I do from my successes because if I'm successful, I just move from one task to the next. But if I make a mistake or if I'm unsuccessful, I tend to stop and reflect and see what went wrong so I don't make that same mistake again. Um, and so this is a great opportunity in today's read to see Saul make some huge mistakes in his leadership role. And I think this is great for us because I truly believe that every single law enforcement officer is in a position of leadership because your entire community is watching you and following your example. Not all the time, obviously, but people are watching you to see what kind of decisions you do make. So let's go through 1 Samuel chapters 14 and 15 and kind of see what sticks out. And here were my takeaways from this as we learn from Saul's mistakes. Verse 2, Saul's avoiding his responsibility as king and judge over Israel. He's hiding underneath a tree outside the city, and he's surrounded by 600 soldiers who won't let anybody come in and talk to him. Verse 24, Saul shows extremely poor judgment and a lack of understanding when he curses his men and says, basically, you shall not eat today until this battle is done. Well, they're exhausted and they needed to replenish their fluids, and just like if you're playing a football game, man, you got to drink lots of water, you got to replace electrolytes. Well, Saul wouldn't let him do any of this, and they grew weaker as the day went along. It's just a total lack of experience on his part in making some bad decisions. In verse 30, verse 26, Saul tries to rule by fear and not respect. Verse 32, Saul makes a bad decision that we'll see as we go along. It snowballs into other bad decisions. Verse 33, Saul doesn't take responsibility for his choices and he blames others for his mistakes. Verse 36, Saul asks God for an answer, but then he grows impatient and he doesn't wait for the answer. He just moves on into what he thinks is right, and it winds up being really bad for him. Verse 38, Saul again points the finger at others and tries to avoid his own mistakes. Verse 39, Saul makes a rash vow and a stupid statement and almost gets Jonathan killed because of it. To the point where in verse 44, Saul shows a complete lack of compassion and a lot of hypocrisy when he says, hey, let's just go ahead and kill Jonathan. Luckily, the soldiers stepped in and saved Jonathan. Then we get into chapter 15, verse 2. Saul is disobedient in the things that God has called him to, which leads to him losing God's endorsement for his kingship. Verses 3 through 10 tells the story of that disobedience with the Ammonites. Verse 12, Saul arrogantly thinks that Samuel is coming to congratulate him after this battle when actually Samuel points out the disobedience in Saul's actions. Um, so Saul goes from, hey, congratulate me, I did a great job, to all of a sudden, well, I didn't do such a great job. It was these soldiers. It was their fault. Which, if that's the case, so again, Saul shows a lack of ability to lead well if he can't control what his men are doing. And then verse 16, we see Saul's pride welling up again when he thinks he has done nothing wrong and it's everybody else's fault. Verse 20, instead of repenting when he's confronted by Samuel, he gets real defensive. Verse 21, Saul again blames his soldiers for his lack of leadership. And then in verse 25, Saul tries to sweep his mistakes under the rug so he can save face with all the people of Israel. Um, there are a lot of mistakes here, so there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And the things that we can take away from this is don't get prideful, admit your mistakes, do your job, pray to God, and wait for an answer. Or the better thing to do is get prayed up ahead of time, pray for God's protection, pray for your judgment when the time comes that you will make the right calls and you'll make the right decisions because you've asked God for that wisdom ahead of time. That's very important. Um, Character matters. Again, We're all leaders. Everybody in law enforcement is a leader. I don't care if you're a frontline officer and you're not a sergeant or you're not a lieutenant or whatever. The officer on the front line answering calls is a leader. Make no mistake about it. And you can learn a lot from these lessons. Pray blessings on you, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow as we get into 1 Samuel chapter 16. So see you tomorrow.